And our last presentation today by Bence Sipka, and he's the founder. Sipka Bence is the founder of LifeTech Center, and he is the expert in digital addiction. And his presentation is going to present how technology forms the perception, the behavior, and the feelings of a person. How we can actually divide between healthy and unhealthy technologies from the psychological point of view, and how artificial intelligence affects social interactions. Thank you very much. I welcome you all. And I'm so happy that you heard this fantastic and wonderful presentation, because I'm going to speak about people, I'm going to speak about us, and I'm going to speak about the fact why development is so scary and why we try to avoid development as such. I'm the founder of LifeTech Balance, and with my colleagues, we work on finding out how to create a healthy balance. I also deal with addictions. My clients, they look for different solutions and help, and so I'm finally, in the end, I introduced myself as an environment psychologist, which means that I will deal with environments. And then, so you're an environment psychologist. Can you please give me some recommendations on where to put the sofa in the living room or the curtains? And no, this is not the environment I mean, and I cannot give you recommendations with this regard. I'm also colorblind, so this is not something I would dare to give you recommendations in my PowerPoints. I usually just checked upon by my wife whether the colors are okay. So I deal with the human behavior when we enter a digital sphere, how it affects our behavior, how it affects our perception, our decisions, and our feelings. We all feel the degree of how our environment, how our world has changed. Have you seen the Jurassic Park #1, the first episode? Have you seen the second series of Jurassic Park? So there is a generational distinctions. However, if you've seen the first one, you've seen the second one. So if you remember, the visitors, they arrive at the island and they're all amazed by the dinosaurs. So this is something that we experienced in the 1990s when we're amazed and we're at all by the technologies, by the smartphone and so forth. And now 30 years have passed, and we feel that these technologies, they are running loose. They escaped from the cages as dinosaurs, and we see different phenomena. We see addictions. We see the polarization of our society. And for us to be able to understand the phenomena, we also need to understand some of the features of the technology. And this very first property of the technology is that technology gives us an alternative channel, alternative solution, meaning that we can satisfy our needs. For example, if we want to have a date, we want to find a date and we do not feel brave enough to ask somebody for a date, then we have the Tinder. Or if we would like to communicate with someone, there's the Messenger app. If we want to get somewhere, we use a car, we can find a map. We find parallel alternative solutions, and I can choose how I want to satisfy my need. Also, technology alters our perception. What I mean by this is that there are certain simple technologies, binocular, for example. If I look into the binocular, what can happen? Our perception focuses I can access my information, but then I exclude the rest of perception. For example, I do not see what's in front of my feet, or if something else happens around me. So my focus area is narrowing down, and I will not be in contact with any other occurrences in my environment. For example, I cannot hear the birds singing, or I will not be able to perceive the wind and how it caresses my skin. So the technology can alter our perception. From an experience from Australia, we learned that people were people were researched when they were heading for work. Some people were using different applications while others were not. And those who used applications, their performance has improved at work. They were more intensive, and those who rode a bicycle for work and used an application, they got faster to their workplace, while those who were not paying attention, for example, to their GPS or to their watches, they were enjoying more the environment that they were at. So basically, when we use an application, when we are using a device, it alters our perception. I'm not saying that one is better or worse. The thing is that sometimes we just pay more attention and more focus on data or performance while we're doing something. It is exciting when we receive good feedback or likes on social media. So what these interactions are about? It means that we are being loved, that we are being cherished, and we are being recognized. But maybe this data does not reflect the truth. It doesn't mean that in my real human interactions, I'm considered the same way. We do feel that these programs and maybe applications, they can be manipulated and they can lead to a dead end. When my client says, yes, indeed, I have 10,000 followers, I interact with amazing number of persons, but I cannot ask my neighbor to babysit my cat. Now, this is a trap that we can fall into if we only base our performance based on our online interactions. So what happens when data is manipulated? Well, first of all, we can mask our activities. What I mean by this is, for example, when on Instagram I have lots of followers and friends, it doesn't mean that I'm popular, or it doesn't mean that I'm satisfied with my interactions. I might even feel lonely. Or, for example, colors of the mobile phone. We actually conducted a research at the local university. For a couple of days, the participants, they used a black and white interface on their phone. And when we asked them how it felt to have a black and white phone, they said, well, they didn't like it at all. It was disgusting. It was awful. And somebody just gave up on the research, and they said, no, they're not going to participate anymore in this research. What we realized that is at the very end of the 2-week research, the group spent an hour less time on the internet than the control group. It means that when we enter the digital environment, we make unconscious decisions. And we say, okay, I want to use the social media for 30 minutes, but in the end, we spend an hour because these elements in our environment they unconsciously interact with us and alter, manipulate our decisions. Or sometimes it's not even the content, but the colors of the screen, because the colors, they give us a dopamine input, and it just gives us pleasure. We also asked for different questions with regard to depression. And in the end of the second week, the group that underwent the research, they just stated that they didn't feel as depressed or they didn't feel as sad as previously, which means that if we deduct the pleasure from using digital devices, then in the end, I feel less depressed. So now again, if something is joyful or pleasant, it should lead me to feeling even better. But now there is a contradiction. I'm not going to speak about the feeling of reward, but the more reward it is, the more pain there is as well. And so the problem with social media is that they're way too enjoyable or pleasant. So the aim is to produce less enjoyable applications in the future. As for gambling, let's see how technology masks different experiences. There's a classic research from 1980s. What is it that's so pleasurable, so pleasant while gambling? Why do we enjoy gambling that much? So there was one group of people when they played at the casino, all the intensive triggers, the colors were taken away. So there were no sounds rooting for you by the machine at the casino. Or it just stated the result. It gave you 70 cents if you won something, for example. And then in the end of the research, it turned out that the group that won while gambling or lost while gambling, and when the machine was celebrating, the emotional reaction of the person was the same, whether they won or they lost, which means that you knew that you were losing money, but because of the celebrating sound and flashlights, you felt the same as if you were winning. So basically, the users, while winning or losing, they had the same excitement and they felt the same joy. And this is something what we call by masking, which means that you basically, as a result of the manipulation of sound and color manipulation, you feel different as you felt otherwise. Let's take a look at other examples. Whether I don't know if you're familiar with Tinder, and I don't know if this is also called as flesh market. Flesh market is a market of flesh. This is what Tinder is called. Which means that this is visual logic, the way Tinder is built. There is very little visual information based on which you have to decide about people. Then you have to decide whether you like the person or you don't. It actually starts the process of building subjects. So basically, this is what you feel as a user, that you are participating on a market, on a flesh or a meat market. Now, this is something that we try to teach. And TikTok is quite exciting because in 3 or 4 years, it's become very popular. And if someone is freshly registered, after 30 minutes in 3 months, you will increase it by 2.5 times. So you will increase it from 30 minutes to 3 hours if it triggers such behavior. I wish us as psychologists could achieve a similar result with the clients when we work with the clients. So what it basically says that very quickly, without any effort, you can get access to plenty information. This is actually what you evaluate, how much effort something means, how much effort you will need to invest in order to receive joy. So who believes that technology reduces effort? Okay, you should have raised your hands, but never mind. This is the end of the day. Technology should actually reduce our efforts, right? But there's also something else that's going on. I'm going to show you an example. Just imagine that your doctor prescribes you a very strict diet. And the doctor says, from now on, you will only eat steamed broccoli. And so you decide to follow your doctor's advice, and you will eat steamed broccoli. You purchase broccoli, you prepare, and at the end of the day, when you're tired, there's a plate of broccoli on your table. And you say, okay, I'll eat it. It won't be very pleasant, but you still. But then imagine you go home and there's steamed broccoli, and then your wife during the day prepared some stew. And so there's the broccoli and the stew in the fridge. No one's watching. So you decide to eat the stew. And then, let's face it honestly. Raise your hand if you would eat the broccoli, if you had the option to eat the stew. Okay, many of you have failed. There are other options and more difficult scenarios as well. So imagine you have the broccoli, you have the stew, and your wife just ordered a pizza. It's the XXL, a pizza, and she cannot eat it all alone. You really need to help her out because otherwise she will throw it out. So who is the one who would still stick to the broccoli? Only 2 or 3 people. Great. Okay, let's see the fourth option. You have broccoli, you have the stew, you have the pizza, and there's a wonderful chocolate fondue. Are you still sticking to the broccoli? Okay, one person. Why I chose this example? Why I chose this example? Psychologically, the effort is not merely an amount. So it's not about only an exercise that you need to eat broccoli, which requires a certain amount of effort. But effort is also an indication. What I mean is that you have different options, you have different alternatives. And the perception of effort and motivation changes depending on the number of options. If you have plenty of options, then the value of motivation of different other options changes. Let's say I'm a researcher. 45, 50 years ago, I went to a library and I read all the books I could. Then 20, 30 years have passed. Now I can also search for information on the Google Internet. So I'm not going to head to the library. I'm going to search for information on the Google. And now we have AI. So probably will opt for AI. But basically, the fact that I go to library, I take a book, I start using it. Now the perception of effort changes. I would feel that it takes way too much effort for me to go to the library. And the same thing goes to our social interactions. If you want to ask out a girl for a date, or I want to pull the button to the right on Tinder, or I want to speak with my AI girlfriend, now compared to the last option, the first option means way too difficult, way too complicated. But so the alternative options, they change the perception of effort and the level of difficulty of the first option. I still have 5 more minutes. Because effort is not only a quantity, but it's also an indication. And the technology, a good technology is a technology that requires effort, where I need to use my resources. That's why I like the presentation before me. We spoke about the simulator and simulations, why the simulators are great and why ChatGPT is great. But basically, every time I use a technology and I need to use my cognitive resources, this is healthy in the long term. And I would like to present you a model that will help you in defining what a healthy technology or unhealthy technology is. Because if we think about technologies, first of all, we can evaluate a technology based on the joy it brings, colorful images and quick access to the enjoyment. And the second aspect is the level of effort it requires. On the level of design, let's say, whether this technology requires thinking. And if we take these two aspects, so we can define two clear groups of technologies. Digital addiction of course, is a field where I work at. It can be social media, it can be gambling, it will be adult content, different online shopping platforms. So this is where we have a high level of enjoyment and joy, and very low level of effort. And then there are also other technologies that do not trigger addiction at all. So I've never heard of a client that would be addicted to Excel tables, for example, or for example, if learning, for example. So there are also technologies that require a lot of effort, but they do not bring you fulfillment or joy whatsoever. But of course, there are people who do enjoy Excel tables. And there are also technologies, and depending on how you use them, how you apply those technologies, they can differ from the previous two. And you also measure the effort and the joy, like ChatGPT or a video game. Even a video game can be quite healthy. It can be a healthy technology because there are video games that require a lot of effort on behalf of the users. They need a certain level of knowledge, cooperation, and so forth. So they remain healthy. And if we speak about technology, so I prefer to use ecology terminology because as ecology forms part of our lives, we need to think in ecological terms. I think that technologies that bring much joy but require very little effort, they can be called as parasite technologies because they are there and they are just reducing our energy, and we try to get rid of these unhealthy habits. And then again, there are technologies that require a lot of effort. They can be joyful, they can bring joy, and they can please us, and they can be regarded as healthy technologies. And thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.